And welcome everyone to the Tech Connect session, Problem Solving at Work. Hope everyone's having an awesome day today. Just a quick reminder, we're going to be talking about problem solving, obviously. And last Thursday, Pete talked about attention and when the brain gets stuck. And so he talked about the levels of dopamine and adrenaline in the brain and when it's too low versus too high, and you want optimal levels so that you're not totally bored or overly stressed, and how do you get to the right levels of chemicals in the brain so that you're performing at peak performance so that you can solve problems, for example, and what to do when you are stuck, when your brain is at an impasse, and how can you get to a point where you're having some insight to solve the problems. So I'm taking those concepts and we'll be talking today about what does that mean for you at work. So do you ever feel like this? I know I do. It's like every way you turn, there's a problem. There's always problems around you. Some are large, some are not so big. I'm going to share with you a little bit of my problem-solving story associated with this session. I run a weekly accountability group Monday mornings where we review what we did the previous week and what our priorities are for the upcoming week. And last week, I said, I have to create a session on problem solving for my monthly Tech Connect session, and I don't have any content. And someone in the group, her response immediately was, well, that is a problem to solve. And I thought, oh yeah, I never thought of it as this is a problem to solve. Usually with Tech Connect sessions, it's a topic I've done before. I have, I can just take the content and leverage it. This was something I'd never actually trained before, although I have solved problems in the past, but I've never trained this. And it's like, yes, this is a problem. So how am I going to approach this? What process am I going to use? How am I going to go about solving this problem? What did I do? I did what everyone does. I did a Google search, right? I jumped immediately to, oh, well, let's just find some resources. And there were 267 million articles, 35 problem-solving techniques and methods, 13 models. What is problem solving? The ultimate guide, 6-step model. And this one I really liked, 11 brilliant problem-solving techniques nobody taught you. And of course, this went on and on for 267 million more ideas. So now I had a new problem. I didn't even know where to start and what to do. So I had to rethink my approach a little bit. Before we jump into more about what I did and how to solve problems, I want to move into breakout groups. So Kelly will do her magic and send you to your rooms. What is the hardest part of solving problems, and how do you solve problems? So talk about those two questions and come back with someone in your group prepared to share. See you in a few. Thank you. Welcome back from your breakout rooms. Thank you, everyone, I know we had a lively discussion, a great discussion in our room. Kelly, who was in group one to share back?
I just have to pull them back. So Brenda, Julie, Ryan, and Sam.
All right. Who is speaking on behalf of your group?
I'll go ahead.
Okay, you go ahead, Ryan.
And if I miss something, Julie, just
all right.
Anyway, I heard you guys talking about me. Snitches get stitches. Anyway, take your time. Don't like go instantly into panic mode, because that usually doesn't help the situation, because things will get overlooked. If you get riled up, you might get others riled up. So you don't want to have a panic room. Assess the level of priority from 1 to 10. Does this have to be done immediately versus can this be drawn out over a couple of hours, maybe a day, a week, depending on the situation? Are you bringing the issues to the right people? And then gather all the information, do proper follow-ups, using context and perspective, and if you're not doing if you're not acting, that is an action. What else? I guess anticipate. What's the word we said, Julie? Like, there are constant issues. There might be something that always happens. Recurring issues that sometimes are not in your control. How can you alleviate the strain that this could be on a customer or something else? Anything else, Julie?
Uh,
It was also
Don't-
share your approach in the resolution with the team, so that if it's an issue that might be, repeated or occur again, then there's no use people reinventing the wheel and doing all the research again and all that work if you share the approach and the resolution with the team.
And constant communication.
mhm. And try not to band-aid solution,
Yeah.
right? That's what something you said, Ryan.
Yeah, Band-Aid,
Yeah.
no Band-Aids.
Okay, I was gonna say, let's get to Pete's group before he drops off, because we knew I had to go at through there. That's Jason, Lori, and Sherry.
Okay, so I'm the volunteer, assigned volunteer. Anyways, I'm joking. Okay, so a lot of what we talked about had to do with having a process and a culture, let's just say, that supports problem solving, and we tore apart a little bit about what that could be, which is also a period of time where you're examining the problem, you're not jumping to the solution, and that you may be using reframing or investigating and or getting different opinions, or I like the word Pete used, which was socializing the problem, getting ideas and stuff around it. He talked a lot about how they used, or shared with us how they use design thinking and have a process and almost do it on a regular basis, which to me sounds a lot like they're building a problem solving muscle, and problem solving as a group, not making heroes out of people. And Sherry talked a lot about doing an investigation, or not talked about doing investigations, and what I really liked too was taking lessons learned, making sure that you applied things that you learned from the problem. So it was just really good discussion on how, and then we got into what the opposite, the jumping to solution, the blaming, naming game, cuts people down, adds the stress, which is why it was a joke when we finished that. Blame it on Ryan, right?
That explains the blame it on Ryan. Okay.
Very good discussion, and I liked hearing about how they actually put design thinking to work.
Excellent.
Awesome.
Did I miss anything, everybody? Or?
Okay, and our group was Jason, Victoria, Jane, and myself, and we touched upon a lot of what has already been said, but it was kind of understand what the problem actually is. So take the time to see, one, is it actually a problem, and kind of go from there. Focus on the objectives. And we also said it depends on what the situation is. Is it a work task that you're kind of working through, you're putting something together, or is it a people problem that you're trying to work through? Victoria had even said it, depending what it is, kind of one of the hardest things is not letting it negatively affect you. Now to kind of go through whether it's like people, or whether it's even something you're trying to go through, is being able to associate or separate yourself from it. We talked about realizing a process, just making sure that you have a process to go through things, whether, we kind of said sometimes when you're tackling something and you've got to put something together, you kind of go through an actual process. But that's where, if you can relay that to every situation. We also talked about having, I like how Jason said, is make sure that you have a level of curiosity as well as humility. So you're trying to understand all points of view as well. Check with others to get input, so that, maybe that you're on the right track. And then we also talked about kind of breaking things down into chunks. And I came at it from the perspective of sometimes, when you have a necklace that is all tangled and you can't tackle the whole knot at once, you have to take little bits and bites and start to open the whole thing up. So did I cover everything?
I think so. I think you
Okay.
got, yeah.
Awesome.
So listening to this, it's like, I don't need to say anything else, because this has been I knew that we had a good group of problem solvers in the room, some of the challenge with things like, what you might call soft skills is people learn how to do it. Yes, that Lori, yes, problem solved, exactly. People learn how to do certain things, and with enough practice, it becomes part of just the way you work and the way you operate, and it moves to the learning curve. It moves to the unconscious competence. You know how to do it. You don't even have to think about it. I know how to drive. I don't have to think about driving, right? I can listen to the radio. I can have a conversation. I can sing a song, whatever. Whereas when you start to learn to drive, you're like, what do I do? What's, what is the D? What is the R on the gear shift kind of questions. When you are consciously incompetent, you have no clue. So problem solving, it is a muscle. Someone referred to it being a muscle that you want to practice, you want to, work on and get better at. So let me go back to where did the share screen go? There we go. Let me go back to my presentation. What is it showing a blank screen?
Yeah, it is. Jane.
That's interesting because it shouldn't be. All right. You know what? Let me stop sharing. That is fascinating.
Yeah, especially if it was showing before and now all of a
Yeah.
sudden.
So let me just what I'm going to do one thing.
Do you need us to solve this problem for you?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
it's that. Yeah.
I'm gonna look it up on Google.
Jane,
Let's see what I can do.
Your page is stressing me out with how much you have on your desktop.
So I thought I had stopped sharing. You weren't going to see that.
Jason is going to problem solve for you. Okay, Jane, can you put those all into little folders?
The thing is, I do have an amazing folder system. Those are all the things when I'm on a webinar and it's like, ooh, I want a screenshot. I take screenshots. Those are just my screenshots of things that anyway. But I do have, I'm not going to show you, but I do have an amazing, so see, it's showing blank for presenter display. This is really bizarre. Let me try one more time. I went out of the presentation.
Okay,
now
there
you see it. Okay.
Yeah, perfect.
That was really weird because I went out of the presentation. I quit the presentation. I went back and yes, it was a problem, but I think we're resolved now. So, okay. So thank you everyone for sharing, because there's, a lot of really good magic. So I'm glad we got that on the recording, Kelly, because there's some really good ideas there. There was reference to the problem solving muscle. And so problem solving is a skill that you can learn how to get better at through practice and by focusing on some of the component parts of what makes up problem solving, because it is a multi-step process that you need to go through. So analytical skills, being able to analyze what is going on, right? Looking at data and understanding and picking through and listening to what people are saying and trying to get to what are they really saying instead of what are the words coming out of their mouth, right? Being innovative and using creative thinking. So that's looking for solutions that are different from what you might have tried before or different from what everyone else does, just to be able to, get to a new solution to a problem. A lateral mindset. So that lateral thinking is, just being able to think of it differently again. Adaptability and flexibility. It's like, we've always done this, but let's try something new, being willing to try new solutions and talk about new solutions. Level-headedness, that comes back to, there's a point about, don't panic, take your time. Is this something we absolutely must solve today because people are going to die if we don't? Okay, still, let's take a breath and try to approach it calmly. Or is it something, okay, we got a bit of time to solve this. Taking initiative. Learning how to recognize problems before they become really big problems. So while they are still small-ish problems, and solving them early on in the process. And I like this last one because it never occurred to me that this was a skill you needed at problem solving, but resilience, because sometimes your first idea doesn't work. Sometimes it takes a long time and a lot of hard work to truly solve the problem and get to the end point. Jason in our group mentioned something. You talked about where are you now? What's the problem? And where do you want to get to? What is the desired outcome? And mapping the steps. Well, sometimes there's a lot of steps in between those two that you have to go through. And that can take a lot of resilience.
Jean, I think even in that resilience point and kind of reassess when your first idea doesn't work, I think sometimes that's having that ability just to step back too, because you're looking at this nonstop. I think Pete gave the example of the Sudoku puzzle that he was working on, is that you just keep looking at it, went and made a coffee, comes back, and you're sitting there going, it was right in front of me the whole time.
Yeah.
It's just because sometimes you get so caught up and so wound up that it's not working. And sometimes, you know what, your first idea does work. It just, you couldn't see the big picture at that time.
Yeah.
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 Can I add a point on
Please.
resilience too?
Please.
Is that the real definite or the full definition of resilience is recover quickly, and people forget the quickly. So people get like married to their solutions and stay with it too long too.
That's I like how you extend the idea, because the quickly piece is important. And one of the hardest things when you're doing any kind of, if you're brainstorming a solution, just coming up with new marketing ideas or anything, is people do get married to their idea, right? It's like, yes, this is the best idea since sliced bread, and everyone else is thinking, oh, no, it's not. But if you are the leader, if you're in a position of power, whether it may be real power or it may be official or unofficial, formal or informal power, but if you have a position of power, you might push an idea that isn't quite good enough, right? Isn't worthy of being pushed.
Yeah, but it's that balance, like Kelly was saying, like, have you stayed with it long enough, or do we need to abandon it quickly? And it's hard. Yeah.
It's funny.
Exactly.
I'll just jump in real quick with a little story. But my mom used to work in HR, and she was really good at sort of visualizing things. And I remember when I was younger, getting really upset about an idea being rejected at work. And she said, when you put an idea on the table, put the idea on the table. Don't climb up on the table with your idea. So if it's rejected, you're not rejected. Just the idea is not working. The idea was rejected, but you were not rejected. And that, for 25 years, that has stuck in my head. And it's just such a great visualization. It's like, you are not your idea. You put an idea forward. If it's not working, ditch it, move on, find another great idea, So I just thought I'd share that as we were talking about staying with ideas too long.
I love that, Julie. Thank you. I had to write that down, and I'm also writing down Lori, your point about the resilience and quickly. So ideas are just ideas. They are not you and your identity, right? I like this quote: we cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them. So we really need to think outside the box, right? That, what the heck does that mean? So some of the conditions you might want to create and make sure it's things you're thinking about for effective problem solving is being in the right state of mind. And I'm going to talk a bit more about that in a second and link back to what Pete was talking about last week. Involving others is appropriate. So make sure you have the right people on the team to solve the problem. Give yourself time and space to think through the process. So don't panic, understand what is the time frame to solve the problem. So you want to create an environment for effective problem solving. And time and space, the space piece can also mean things like, it could be get out of the office, go for a walk in the woods, go play with your dog for 10 minutes, get a coffee, whatever, to give your brain an opportunity, but also for a team to be in. Sometimes you need to be in a physically different location than your office in order to solve a problem. So consider talking to Julie and taking your team to one of Julie's spaces when you have to do one of those problem-solving working sessions, because that puts you in a different environment, which opens up your brain to new ideas and new things to think about. So Pete talked last week about the chemicals in the brain, even though he'd promised us he wasn't going to talk about chemicals and chemistry and get too technical. But anyway, and some research that had been done when the levels of dopamine and adrenaline, when they're too low, you're bored and you're not operating at peak performance. When they're too high, you are stressed out and you are not operating at peak performance. So you want to figure out how to get yourself into that kind of that optimal, stage where you have some dopamine and adrenaline. So yes, this is a serious problem, but not so much, oh my goodness, I'm overwhelmed, my brain has shut down. Okay. And if you want more information, if you missed last week's session, the recording is out. You can listen to the whole thing. And so when your brain is not working well, if you're at one of the two extremes, and it's not, firing the way you want it to fire to come up with the solutions that you need, when you're it's called the impasse phenomenon. When you're there, some things is, you need to let the brain idle a little, and reduce the activation of wrong answers, is how Pete has described it. So having a quiet mind, if you're, you have too many of the chemicals going in your brain, you want to quieten your mind. And, being happy and relaxed is going to help you. So again, walk in the woods. If you've got the team together, you've gotten together to solve a problem, do something at the beginning of the session that's totally has nothing to do with the problem, like solving a puzzle, playing word games, doing something that's going to get people laughing a little bit, building some of those relationships, because when people enjoy working together and are having fun together, they can work much more effectively together. They can handle those big challenges. So build in some of those things into the process. So the fun, that reduces the anxiety. Reflect from a high level, don't get in the weeds. So make sure you've defined at the high level what's going on. Taking a break as needed, and practice mindfulness. Okay. So we've talked about, I think, pretty much all of this, but I just want to make sure that we touched on all of the points. So I'm going to quickly go through this. Out of those 267 million, this was the one I liked, the 6-step problem-solving model, because it seemed to cover kind of everything about defining the problem, determining the cause, developing solutions, selecting a solution, implementing, and then evaluating. So defining the problem comes down to asking good questions. You need to ask good questions, and you need to ask them of the right people. You want to understand the context in which the problem happened, what the background was, what were all the things going on, what are the symptoms of the problem, how did you even know that there was a problem happening, what are the implications? So because of this problem, these things are happening, and this is why it is bad. This is why we need to solve it. And you may find, as you go through this whole process, that you go back to step one a couple of times. And I think, Jason, you referred to this in our breakout of, it's like, oh, this isn't actually the problem. There's actually something deeper we need to solve. We actually were working on a symptom, not the fundamental problem. So, when you have a cold and you take cold medicine, it only works on the symptom. It's not going to kill the actual virus, because it's not nothing's going to kill the virus. You just have to let it work its way through. But at least you can treat the symptom. When you're dealing with a problem at work, yes, dealing with the symptoms will be important. That might be a very short-term solution, but you want to get to the fundamental, deeper problem, the long-term problem. So this is where you look at the root causes. Again, ask good questions. There are a whole bunch of things. Of course, it would be an entire day of training to get into all of these things. Do one of those Google searches. And there are fishbone diagrams you can do. Well, this leads to this, to this, to this. You can develop a flow chart of what was the process that's going on, and how did these things happen. Do word maps, mind maps. Brainstorming is good at this point of what do we think was really causing the problem? Asking the 5 whys, which is asking the question why 5 times. Well, why did this happen? Okay, so then why did that happen? And then why did that happen? And that is all going to help you get deeper and deeper and deeper. And as you get deeper and deeper, this is the main point where you might go, oh yeah, there's a different problem we need to solve. Okay, so making sure, oh, and Victoria's put in, if you want to check in the chat box, a link to something you can try. Chat GPT. I don't know if that's how it's pronounced, but anyway, been hearing a lot about that in the news lately. So there are a lot of, there's a huge list of different ways you can dig into this, and maybe that's a topic for another day, is to spend more time just on this one little piece of it. But it's really, what are the root causes of your problem? And then this is where people often jump really fast to this stage. Oh, customers are unhappy, so I need to decrease the price. You immediately come to a solution without understanding what the problem is and what's causing it. So you want to make sure you do those first couple of steps really well first, and then come up with solutions. So people often will do brainstorming. There's different ways to do brainstorming. Group brainstorming is what most people do. You sit around in a room and people throw out ideas, and you put them on Post-its, and you put them up on a wall. And then it's after everyone has exhausted all their ideas, you'll do some organizing and sifting and choose what you want to evaluate further. You can also do round robin, which is, I give an idea, and then Lori gives an idea, and then Kelly gives an idea, and then Ryan, and you just go around the room, and you keep going around the room until everyone has run out of ideas. You can do silent brainstorming, and this works if you don't have people physically together in the same place or at the same time. Everyone's given the problem, and in just wherever they are, they write down every possible solution they can come up with, and they'll spend a lot of time, and they might go back to it, leave it for a day and come back to it, and they'll add more. And then everyone shares them all together, like in a shared document or something. And it's anonymous, so people don't know who had which ideas, which is helpful when it comes to sifting through them. Silent brainstorming is really good if you have 1 or 2 people on the team who talk a lot and have or exert a lot of power and control. And then you have some people who, they have good ideas, but they tend to be quieter. They're more on the introverted side. Silent brainstorming allows everyone to get every idea out. And asking the question, how might we? This is a really good question. How might we solve the problem? Okay, how might we make customers happier? How might we reduce the price? How might we fix the bug in our system? And then you do it as like a flow diagram. Okay, how might we do this? Okay, so then how might we do that? And how might you just kind of keep flowing down? So that's a really helpful question when you get stuck. Make sure as you find as many solutions as possible, and look at, do they relate to the root cause, and how do they relate to the symptoms? That will help you when you get to the next stage of evaluating, because you'll find that some naturally will rise to the top and some will kind of sink to the bottom as you connect it back to the problem. And sometimes you want to take a little bit of this one and a little bit of that one and a little bit of a third one, and you come up with a much more creative, much more effective solution coming out of all of that. You've got a million ideas, or even 20, 100 ideas, whatever. You need to select them. It is helpful to determine the selection criteria before you start generating solutions, because people get married to ideas. That the conversation, that we were talking about this a bit earlier, and people get wrapped up in the ideas and the solutions and the things that they can do, and they start thinking about execution, and in order to oh my God, I've lost the word, but not impassionately, but I can't think of the word. I'm sorry. But in order to, very logically pick a solution, you need to establish the criteria ahead of time. So looking at what and these are just possible criteria you may use: the feasibility, the solution, the cost, the timing, how easy it will be to implement, the long-term ability to prevent the problem from recurring. We had a comment earlier about recurring problems. So if this happens all the time, how do we stop it from happening? Not just stop this one incident from happening. Ease for the user. So, is it going to be easy for people to implement? What are the risks, etc.? So figure out what your criteria are so that you can then bring those criteria in and very logically go through and, yes, no, $20, $100, whatever it is, you evaluate them. And so you go through and you pick your solution. So it's like, okay, we're going to do option 47. This is what we're going to do. You then need to implement it, figure out what the resources that are needed in order to implement. You'll have done a little bit of that as you figured out the feasibility, right? You'll have to understand that, define the timing. Depending on the scope of the solution, this may become a true project where you need a project manager and a project team. It could be a 6 to 12 month solution. Some problems and solutions are, much shorter in time frame. This will be fixed in the next 2 days. These are the 2 people who are going to go do the work. And then you go and do it. Most people stop at this point. Oh, we've solved the problem. Let's move on. What's the next problem? But you do want to evaluate as you're going through and implementing. You want to make sure you're on track. You want to make sure, even at this point, you may start implementing a solution and go, you know what? This isn't actually solving the problem we had. You may even at this point go back and redefine the problem and start all over again. And, are you hitting your milestones? And always, thinking about, can it prevent this from happening again? So what can we build into the solution to make sure that we've solved bigger, longer term problems, not just short term problems? Okay. So that's the model. Kelly, I will send you this link, which Kelly can then send out with the slides and the recording. It's a little quiz. It took me like 3 minutes to do this quiz, but it gave me a good idea of what stages in the problem solving process I was good at and which ones I was less good at, which are helpful then as you think about, if I want to practice and build this muscle, I want to get better at solving problems. I want it to become more intuitive and automatic for me. How do I do this and help my organization? This can just help you figure out, okay, these are the areas that I want to work on. We'll get to questions and discussion in a second, but just a reminder, next month, Pete's going to be talking about drama and uncertainty, rewards, dangers, threats. And I could say the only certainty is more uncertainty. That is true. So he'll be talking about certainty and uncertainty, and I'm going to then take that and what does that mean in a work environment? All about responding and reacting to situations, understanding how you're feeling, understanding how other people are feeling, and learning how to respond appropriately or more appropriately, depending. I'm sure everyone responds appropriately already. Excuse me. All right. That I'm going to stop share